right, it is time to get started. Good to see everyone here. We'll be picking up in Daniel chapter 3. Daniel chapter 3. We had talked about 24 and 25, how King Nebuchadnezzar has just seen these men go into the fiery furnace, and so his mighty men have fallen and died instantly. And then you have Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego go bound into the burning fiery furnace, and Nebuchadnezzar is questioning what he's seeing. He's stood up and he's in awe. Did we not cast 3 men bound into the fire? But I see 4, and they're walking in the midst of the fire. They are not hurt, and the appearance of the 4th is like the son of the gods. And then picking up in verse 26, it says that King Nebuchadnezzar came near to the door of the burning fiery furnace. He declared, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out and come here. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out from the fire. And the satraps, the prefects, the governors, and the king's counselors gathered together and saw that the fire had not had any power over their bodies of those men. The hair of their heads was not singed, their cloaks were not harmed, and no smell of fire come upon them. Nebuchadnezzar answered and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants, who trusted in him and set aside the king's command, and yielded up their bodies rather than serve and worship any god except their own God. Therefore, I make a decree. Any people, nation, or language that speaks anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb, and their houses laid in ruins. For there is no other God who is able to rescue in this way. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. All right, take a minute to look that over, mark that up, and then we'll talk about it. Okay. What stands out to you, or what questions do you have? Miss Kay has our first thought here. That microphone's coming.
Well, we didn't discuss who this 4th person might have been in the fire.
I think we briefly discussed it, but what do you notice about that? Go ahead and bring it back to mind for us.
Well, he said it looks like a son of the gods. So that sounds like more than just an angel to me. But
yeah, well, and you bring up a good point. The sons of the gods, it's not very much of a descriptor, is it? And I think that highlights part of what the challenge is, and we see this as anyone tries to describe even an angelic, confirmed angelic being, or even one who appears in the presence of God and sees, open up the book of Ezekiel and start in chapter 1 and see someone try to describe the glory of God. How do you begin to put to words what's going on? And so I think what Nebuchadnezzar is noting there is this is not anything human in there. This is something different. It looks like from another world. And so it's the son of the gods. It's something from the heavens. And because he is a king or a man who worships multiple gods, he just says, it's something of the realm that I don't understand completely. So I think that's where we would get the best understanding of that. And so an angel, likely, as we look and see what's happening, it's God at work. So, but we don't know for sure.
Some people think it's Jesus.
There is the possibility that some people would be correct in saying it might be Jesus here. We see John 8, the reference to Jesus being the presence of the Son of God. And so this could be a nod to that, likely just at least pointing out that God is at work in sending one of his to go and secure his people. I didn't see anything that was concrete enough for us to say, though, it is Jesus. Now, if you have something else I've missed, I'll gladly listen. But I think we can at least say angelic being, possibly Jesus, because we do have references to Jesus being present and active in the Old Testament. Lisa.
Job 1:6 references the sons of God coming before him, and Satan came with them. So these lesser created beings are also considered the sons of God, not capital S Son of God, but sons of God.
Sure. Good. Okay. Mark has something behind you there, if you would.
I see all of this about, the God revealing himself and authority. We see this idea of what authority is, and this is a training for the king. But I found it almost humorous the way he seems like he's so excited after he sees what he sees, and he goes and he yells at Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, "Come out here!" It's like he said, "Get out here, you guys! What was that?"
Yeah.
He's like fascinated by what he sees, but I think as we read the rest of that, we see the God of. He still hasn't attached himself to it yet.
Yes, correct. That it's interesting as it says in verse 26. You point out that he's calling for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to come out. He's so in awe and enamored with what's taking place. What did he ignore? The fire. Because what does it say? He came near to the door of the burning fiery furnace. He had just witnessed his own mighty men fall and burn alive, coming near to the door. And so here comes King Nebuchadnezzar. He's so in awe and so caught up in there's something else going on here, that he rushes to the door and says, "Get out here. I need to see what's happening." And isn't that the power of God at work in us? That as we and showing himself to the world around us, that as fearful as it can be to approach the throne of God, when people see God working and see who he truly is, it draws us closer to him. It's the work that he's doing. And in a similar fashion, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and this fourth being draw him in and test him against the fire. Kay has something to offer here.
Don't you imagine God protected him from the fire because he had work for Nebuchadnezzar to do?
Yeah, I think that's what we should at least consider, is that if his own mighty men had fallen and burned alive, we would expect Nebuchadnezzar to as well. But he is coming face to face with the presence of one of God's angelic beings, or Jesus, or a spiritual being. And as he's drawing close to inquire, God's not going to strike him down. That he's going to allow him to see what's going on. I think there's something to be said to that. Lisa.
interesting that they were bound when they went in. When they came out, there was no evidence that the fire had affected them in any way, but there was also no bindings on them. They
Yeah.
were no longer bound.
Which verse was that? I know you're right.
I just read it. The
I
fire
know.
had no effect on them. Their robes were unaffected.
Verse 25.
Okay, sorry. I got lost.
But I see 4 men unbound. Yes, there we go. I was like, it's not in the section we just read, but you're right. So I was trying to track it. So verse 25 confirms they're unbound, and then we see in verse 27 that not only are they unbound now, but there is no proof that they were ever in the fire. I mean, you think of all the clothing that was put on them back earlier in the chapter, where it says that they had their cloaks, their tunics, their hats, and other garments in verse 21. We're all familiar with a bonfire, going out camping, and you sit around a campfire, and you wake up the next day, and you can smell it. You can still smell it. It's in the clothes. It's in your nose. It just becomes, it's on you, right? Even as you wash, it takes a minute for it to kind of clear out. And here they come out of the fire, and there is nothing. There is not a hair singed. The cloaks were not harmed, and no smell had come upon them. Scott.
I like that. I just thought about them coming out of the fire only after he says, hey, come out. Just the idea of they're in the midst of this fire, they're released in the midst of the fires when they feel the freedom, when they sense that they're okay.
Yeah.
And God got them through that, much of it. And now there was no rush out of the fire. I don't know if I'm reading too much in, but I do like the idea that they were able to now, on their own volition, to just walk out of the fire when someone says, come on out, And so now I just get that picture of, we get in the midst of a trial, a fiery trial in our lives, and once if we can sense that God has us in that moment, and we are protected and safe and free from the consequence of that fire, with no smell and all of that kind of happening in the moment.
Yeah.
Now our ability to be in that fire is so much easier to manage your way, and you don't necessarily have to jump immediately out of the fire. You can walk your way out.
We have to endure through that trial as long as it's going to last. What they're showing is a submission to the king's orders still, right? They're still honoring that the king has thrown them into the fire. But what has the fire done? It's not only tested Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, but it has tested the judgment of the king. Because the king bound them, if you'll make your way to Mark, the king bound them. He had made a judgment against them that you're a problem, I'm going to throw you in the fire. And the fire then tests that theory and says, no, the binding is inaccurate, I'm going to remove that, and I'm going to sustain my people. And so you have Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego enduring, and to Scott's point, not taking it on themselves to walk out. Go ahead, Mark.
Not a big thing that I'm seeing here, but it's just, we see the prefects and the counselors, all the kings, all these people who are so much a part of this story. They're the ones instigating things against God's people and against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and they are there to see it as well. And it's just interesting to see that this comes up, and it's going to matter later as well. And I mean, what does it say? We see that they see this great miracle, and it has little or no effect.
Yeah, and you see, I mean, just how many people witness it. It's not just the king. And they're standing there and witnessing it and having to measure that against the gods that they serve, right? They're having to measure it against, I mean, these satraps, prefects, governors, and counselors all served gods. And their gods were powerful, which gave them, in their mind, their gods were powerful that gave them the ability to do the work that they were doing and be raised to the power and position they had. And now there's another god on scene that is completely judging their gods and showing them unworthy. Gary?
Well, that brings us right to the king's statement when he calls them out. Servants of the Most High God. Why did he use that title?
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of a silly thought. I mean,
Okay, I'll take silly. We'll start there.
well, Nebuchadnezzar was a work in progress is the way I put it in my mind, because he keeps realizing the one true God over and over, but he goes back. Then he keeps going back,
Yeah.
and then he keeps realizing again.
I think I like the idea of him being a work in progress, and I think this speaks to that more than maybe we understand. We see Most High God and we think he's recognized the one true God. No, he has not. This term could also be translated as the most powerful spiritual being that I've come to know. I'm not pointing to him as the supreme and everyone else is subject to him. I'm just recognizing that of all the spiritual beings that I've become to understand, this one begins to stand out as unique.
That's a good start.
Yeah, and it's a great start. I mean, we should not balk at anyone who at least starts to conceptualize that. That is something good. It's part of the progress towards recognizing who God is. Ida, you had something there?
Even Abraham was a work in progress. And I think we all are. But I think this is something we really need to remember when we're talking to people in the world that haven't found God yet, that it's not just going to take 20 minutes for us to go through the book of Acts with them and all of a sudden, oh, I got to be baptized. You know, it's might be overcoming years and years of programming and different things like that.
Yeah.
And can you imagine being a king and having all this authority and all the things around him? And it's going to take a while for it to sink in. And we need to give others the grace that God has given us to make our own decisions and to go through things in our mind.
Yeah.
So.
And we see that ongoing process within him, not only in the way that he calls Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego out, but later, what does he say in verse 28? That he answers and says, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego." He still sees it as not his own God. He recognizes this God that is on display is unique, and it's the most powerful thing I've ever seen, but he still has not internalized truly who he is and the service that he owes him. So this is not Nebuchadnezzar's a changed man, as in reformed, but he's starting to wake up. He's starting to see the power of God and how much he should pay attention. Betty has an idea for us. Thought or question?
In looking at this whole book, I don't see Nebuchadnezzar as actually being the one who God is speaking to. I think he's speaking to his people, letting them know that he's preparing a deliverer for them. And that's why I kind of had the feeling that this, and of course my Bible also calls it the Son of God. Mm-hmm. But either way, I think the message here is this was, if you keep looking at the whole overall thing, he's preparing the people. There's a deliverer. God is going to deliver his people.
Yeah, and so in that sense, I would agree with you to a point that Nebuchadnezzar is not the focus of the book.
Right.
But he becomes a main character
Oh, yes.
that proves an underlying point of Daniel.
Right.
that this kingdom that's going to be established, as we're talking about, is for all kingdoms and all nations and all tribes to come and submit to. And in that, he's using Nebuchadnezzar as a focal point to say even the most powerful king on earth has to wrestle with who this God is.
Right, I agree with that.
Yep.
But I also feel
But-
like that all the way through, even all of that and all the kings and all the destruction that came on, God was still there for his people.
Absolutely, yes.
And for the future, for
Yes.
all of us, not just his people as
Yes.
being the Jewish people.
Correct.
For all mankind.
Yeah, and so that sets then that to your point, Nebuchadnezzar's not the point, but we have to pay attention to
Yes.
his trajectory because it
Absolutely.
is a message to us that no matter what position of power, no matter who we are in this life, we have to wrestle with the facts just like Nebuchadnezzar had to.
with that.
I think Scott had a follow-up thought here.
Yeah, I like that Nebuchadnezzar, you can kind of see that he is learning at least. That being
some degree, yeah.
that being king doesn't place him in the realm of spiritual beings, you know. And so he sees that the gods have of course, through God, is showing him that your kingdom is not as powerful as this God is. And he's able to say, because he says that they trusted him in verse 28. They trusted God.
Yep.
And then they set aside the king's command.
Yes.
Like, I have a lot of authority, and you yet still set aside that command for your God,
Yes.
who you thought would deliver you, and then you even offered you yielded up your bodies. I like that idea of he's seeing them become that sacrifice for their God in a way, that living. I couldn't help but see Romans 12:1 in that we become living sacrifices in the face of those decisions. How did I word that? We set aside this world's ruler and only trust and serve the true God.
Absolutely.
And so when those things are we're faced with this world's consequences and things, that's our time of decision to become a sacrifice, to let that stuff not be important and still serve the true and living God.
Absolutely. If you'd hand that back to Ida, that'd be great.
So since Scott broke the rule and went to Romans,
You can reference applicable.
well, there's another place in the Bible where there were servants of God that went through a great deal, and their garments were clean once they had gone through that, and once they had prepared themselves again to be with God. And they would be serving their God night and day, and they would be in the city, just like the great city of Babylon.
Yeah.
And the promise to those people was that, and I know it's a different kind of burning heat, but they wouldn't be thirsty, they wouldn't be hungry, and they would not experience burning heat. And I've been thinking about this as we've been talking about it. And that's in Revelation 7, by the way. So, anyways, I think it's another cool example of how great the kingdom that we're in is compared to this greatest of human kingdoms.
Yeah. Good. Now notice, Nebuchadnezzar is shocked by two things in this scenario. One, his first image is these men are unscathed. Like, even as they're in the fire, they're unscathed. They come out, they're unscathed. This is beyond comprehension. The other piece is part of what Kay referenced before at the end of verse 25, the appearance of a fourth, like a son of the gods. Notice how Nebuchadnezzar words that in verse 28. Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants. This is huge for people of that time. Huge. Because gods don't interfere. They just act out their judgment, and you have to figure out what they mean by it. When something goes bad in life, oh, it must be that this God was upset that we weren't doing this. So we'll go sacrifice to him or her and try to appease him or her. Then over here, this is happening, and we'll try to appease. Well, that didn't work. We'll go do it to this God. Oh, then we'll do it to this God. Their gods did not come and make it clear what they were doing. So this God is standing out in a unique way in that he is not just helping you figure out what's going on. He is sending his personal messenger, his angel, to come and intercede and show himself, to reveal his judgment in a way, and to show that this God is interacting with creation. Aaron, if you would please, Steve. So this is a beautiful recognition of Nebuchadnezzar, that he sees this and makes this connection. Go ahead.
Yeah, agree 100%. And the third thing that really impresses him is that they trusted in them and
Yes.
yielded up their bodies as a sacrifice to their God. They were willing to sacrifice themselves rather than worship the false God. So, yeah, he acknowledges that there's a truth, and it was with
So what Nebuchadnezzar do in response to that? King is still king. He's still a human, and so he goes, I know what to do. I'll set up a decree. As if I have authority over this situation. Let me set up another decree. But that's humanity, right? We take control where we think we have control. Now, also proving the point that he is not fully reformed, what stands out about this decree that he offers? I'm sorry? It's violent, not too shocking in light of who Nebuchadnezzar is. That has been his MO, is, hey, you're going to do this or I'll do this. So that has been pretty standard. What else jumps out at you about his decree? Lisa.
No God's able to deliver like the God of Shadrach.
Okay, so he answers his own question from back in verse 15. Who is the God who will deliver you out of my hands? Well, he comes back at the end and he finally recognizes there is no God that has shown this kind of power and authority to save. So yeah, he's seeing that value. So that's good. Hasn't left up his human mind of, I'm going to be violent. Where did we start this story? What was being demanded of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Bow down and worship this idol. What stands out about this decree in contrast to the first decree? Mark.
Still the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. It's not his God. He hasn't adopted this as his God the way he words it.
Okay.
He's still saying that this is your God.
Sure. So he's still talking about the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Aaron. And then Scott, if Aaron doesn't steal the thunder here.
Well, he's put Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego's God in the game. So now he's one of the gods that also needs to be recognized. And so the decree is that people can't speak against their God.
There you go.
It has nothing to do with all of the other gods and the worshiping of the idols or whatever Nebuchadnezzar decrees is worthy of worship. But now this God has proven himself worthy of being
To be listed among
to
the
be
many.
listed among the many. Yes.
Yes. Yeah, and to that point, he doesn't demand worship of the God. He simply says, you're not going to disrespect this God because now I fear this God to some extent, and I don't want him exacting judgment on me, so we're not going to make him mad. Right? We're just as my people, do not make this God mad. You don't have to worship him, but don't make him mad. Okay? Did you have, that was it? Scott says he's good there. And so, yeah, I mean, we see this idea that he's changing, but he's not there yet. Lisa.
We're talking about the message to the Hebrew people. Back in Deuteronomy 4, starting in 27, it says, "And the Lord will scatter you among the peoples. You will be left few in number among the nations where the Lord will drive you. And there you will serve gods, the work of men's hands, wood and stone, which neither see nor hear, eat nor smell. But from there you will seek the Lord your God. You will find him if you seek him with your heart and all your soul." And so there's still that remnant that are seeking him with their heart and soul. And this, if the Jews know anything about their law, they would see that this is the way that they need to go at this point.
Absolutely. And what makes this unique then is this is not only a message to the Jews, but remember this whole chapter from chapter 2 through chapter 7 is all in Aramaic. Remember, this is the diplomatic language. This is a message to all nations, but certainly filled with the imagery and the expectations that were given to the Jewish nation. That becomes the standard by which all nations are supposed to recognize him as well. So not negating their heritage, but expanding the language to be seen by all peoples. Okay, so then what happens is they are promoted back to their positions of power. So it's to be assumed that when they got in trouble, they were taken down in rank, thrown into the fire, expected to be dead, and he's so in awe, he puts them back in position. He's no longer going to hold this over them. Why would I want to make their God mad in that way? I don't even want to demote them at this point. Let's put them back where they were so that we can move on and be okay. All right? So that brings us to the end of chapter 3. As was told, this has a chiastic structure as well. There's something unique. Go ahead, Aaron, before we do that. Well, promoted to that position because they had been removed and maybe they got higher position. Yeah, okay. So maybe the promotion is to say not only back where they were, but to pay some form of value or honor towards them and their God, right? Good. Yeah, I'm good with that. All right. Chapter 3. Let's see if this will kick on here. Yep. Daniel chapter 3. Let's talk through big picture, not all the details again, but what's happened so far. So we start out that this herald comes and proclaims a royal decree. Now it gives us some more insight of what took place, the idol being set up, it's the idea of all that going on, but ultimately we see this herald in verse 4 proclaiming this decree, right? So those first 7 verses are all about this decree going out to the land and everyone needing to submit. What happens next? Do you remember? Verses 8 through, I think, 12. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego become the highlight of the story, and they're accused of doing wrong. Right? They're accused of not worshiping the God or the idol that Nebuchadnezzar has called them to worship. They then have Nebuchadnezzar becoming furious and giving orders on how to remedy this, right? So we see him in a furious rage, verse 13, and that he says, questions Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and even to the point of saying, "Who is this God who will deliver you out of my hands?" He's enraged and wants to make sure that this is settled. Gives orders on preparing to worship. They need to bow down. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, you need to do this. Okay? And then what happens? How does Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego respond? No. Yeah, basically they say no. And so they declare loyalty to God. We have no need to bow down before you. We have no need to answer you in this matter. We will answer to God alone. And so if God needs us to burn let us burn. If we needs us to survive, let us survive, but we will not bow down to you, O king, or your gods. Okay? And then what happens? Nebuchadnezzar's mad again, right? We see him furious, and he gives more orders. All right, well then throw him in the fiery furnace. Burn it as hot as it'll go, 7 times hotter. He just in fury throws out these orders again. You can start to see the pattern form. So what would you expect next? What happens to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? How would you describe what happens? What we talked about this morning. I'm sorry? Nothing happens, and in a sense they're delivered, right? They are delivered. Not only, so we see this reversal from being accused to being delivered. And then finally, we have the king now proclaiming a royal decree. And so in this story especially, it should not be a shocker that the central focus of this chiasm, the point of the author writing in this way here, is to show what it looks like to give loyalty to God. And no other king, no other kingdom. That we declare loyalty to God, verses 16 through 18. That is the thrust of the story. Aaron.
And just to kind of go back on my last point, the final verse, to me, it kind of, the conclusion of the central theme of this chapter is the best possible outcome is a result of trusting in God.
Yes.
If we just put our complete faith and trust in God, whatever happens it's the best possible outcome we can hope for.
Sure. Sometimes it'll be that physical deliverance and promotion to a better position. Something better comes along that we can serve in a better way. But even if not, it is the best outcome to prove God and to prove that we are committed to Him.
Yeah, we don't know how it's going to come, but we just know that it's the best possible course.
Absolutely. All right. Any other thoughts or questions about chapter 3? I think Steve had something.
Actually, I thought it was a time, it might be a useful time to summarize some of this. And guess what? I have a song. Would it be all right to sing a song?
Well, we don't have time to sing a song, but which song are you thinking of?
87 in the regular book.
And which song is that?
Be Still My Soul.
Yeah. I mean, certainly that call to keep the heart stilled in the midst of trouble, right? Calling on God to be the deliverer in that and the one that calms the soul in those moments. So is there a specific phrase in there that you were thinking of?
I could tell chapter 1. I don't want to step on, cause some misunderstanding. Usually I'm the one who does it. Just a thought.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful thought. It's good to see how the messages we sing remind us of these things. And I love that you are always thinking of those for us, Steve. You're a value to us. Thank you so much for that reminder. Be still, my soul. And how do they find stillness in their souls as they're going through this? Focus on God and realizing that He has the authority. He's who we need to submit to. All right. Let's open up chapter 4, kind of get our brains thinking in that line of thought as we start to, I'll leave this up, so if you're still copying or want to process some more, you can have that. But chapter 4 opens up, and we see a slight shift here because we are no longer seeing it from the perspective of a Daniel or a third party, but we are now hearing from King Nebuchadnezzar, right? So chapter 4 opens up. We'll read verses 1 through 3. King Nebuchadnezzar, to all peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied to you. It has seemed good to me to show the signs and wonders that the Most High God has done for me. How great are his signs, how mighty are his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion endures from generation to generation. All right? An interesting opening compared to what we've been seeing. So take a moment to mark that, and then we'll see what conversations we can have before time is up. Okay, what stands out here? What do you notice about Nebuchadnezzar's statements? We'll get Gary here.
Just reading these verses sounds like he's been converted.
He is definitely a changed man, different than the ending of chapter 3, isn't he? He has recognized a uniqueness to this God, unlike his recognition at the fiery furnace. Good. Okay, what about this stands out to show his changed ways, maybe, or his changed hearts? Aaron, you had something there?
Well, he acknowledges that it's the Most High God that has done the things for him. And then, we have to read the rest of the chapter to see all of the things.
Sure.
But the intro is, at least acknowledging that this particular God of Daniel and his friends is the source of, his success. And that he's the one that put him in place, and he's the one that has established him and put him as the head of gold on that statue.
Right. Yeah, he's showing a humility. Scott has something, if you'll make the way with the microphone, but he's showing a certain humility that it's no longer I, Nebuchadnezzar, did something, but this Most High God has done these things for me, as he says in verse 2. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, along with that same thing, I feel like his because he's saying this, like Aaron alluded to, after what we're going to read.
Yeah.
So after he's experienced another teaching from God.
Right.
And I wonder, like, he finished that last chapter with, "You will be torn limb from limb."
Yeah.
I heard that was literal. I saw something that they
Likely
would stretch trees over, and then when they snap back, if you can just, that's enough said about that. Crazy, like, you just think about how literal that could have been. And so what a violent way to get people to serve God.
Right.
Or to honor him.
Right.
And now he says, "Peace be multiplied to you." That's the part that I picked up on. I was like,
Yeah.
It's interesting that he's saying that. Like, where's that coming from? And I think it's only coming from, he is changing that. I love the phrase, he's a work in progress, and we are too. And how that's changed. I think it's changing him to see that this God doesn't make you do things. He draws you to do things. And now Nebuchadnezzar is doing that same thing. He's changing from 1 minute under threat, you better honor this God, and next, okay, I'm gonna do it in a different way. Let me tell you about him.
Yeah.
So that you can be drawn to him as well. So I just think that's cool.
Yeah, and we see this contrast that in chapter the beginning of chapter 3, where he's sending out this edict that all nations and languages and tribes, you must do this or this will happen. That pressure, that wickedness that comes even at the end of the chapter, as he's somewhat recognizing who this God is. He calls him the Most High God there, but it doesn't come with that weight of and understanding of what message that God brings. And now we open up chapter 4, as Nebuchadnezzar's reflecting post what we're going to read here in a minute, and that message has definitely changed. One from edicts and fear to I hope peace comes to you and multiplied in so many wonderful ways. I mean, that is definitely a big change for King Nebuchadnezzar. And so we'll start to look at how he got there. Chapter 4. Very good. Thanks for your attention and your participation today. That was a wonderful study. Thank you.